Welcome to World History Lesson 24. The Victorian Era. Our lesson objectives are: identify the social, political, and economic changes that came about in Great Britain during the Victorian Age, describe the important democratic reforms made in Great Britain during the Victorian Age, understand the extent and influence of the British Empire in the world. After the death of King William IV of England in 1837, the crown passed to a German princess named Victoria. Queen Victoria ruled England from 1837 until 1901. The Victorian era was known for political reform and stability, general peace, and expansion abroad, a strong growing economy, social reform, and a growing feeling among many that the world was a safer place to live. Unlike other countries, England did not experience much suffering during the revolutions of 1848. The English people were not as demanding of change since the government was willing to pass reforms, and the English middle class was gaining political power through democratic means. Around 1860, Queen Victoria accepted the idea that the political party with the most representatives in the House of Commons should form the government. The old idea was that the king or queen form the government. As a result, both political parties, the Liberals and the Conservatives, realized that to become the majority party, they would have to gain the support of the middle and lower classes. To gain such support, reforms were mandatory. This was good for England and its people because the reforms passed made life easier for the people. The most important reform was the Parliamentary Reform Act of 1867, which gave twice as many people the right to vote as before. Most of the new voters were working men. England was only involved in one war during this time. This was the Crimean War, which lasted from 1854 to 1856, was fought in the southwestern section of Russia called the Crimea. English participation in the Crimean War was not good foreign policy. England joined France and Turkey in the war against the Russians. English generals and soldiers were not prepared to fight. In one battle alone, 700 soldiers of the Light Brigade, a respected English force, attacked the Russians. Only 195 soldiers survived. The war dragged on, but when civil war threatened to break out, Russia agreed to peace. The only result of the war was that the Russians agreed not to become involved in Turkish affairs. England's economy was prospering very well during the Victorian era, largely due to the fact that the colonies were providing English factories with cheap raw materials. When the raw materials were made into finished products, they were sold back to the colonies. England had a ready market in the colonies, and their economy was a direct result of the vast British Empire. A new working class of people emerged during this new era, and though it was lower on the economic and social scale, it was very large. The middle class was very small compared to the working class. It remained small into the 20th century. In England, prosperous industrialists were competing with wealthy landowners for political power. Supporting these wealthy individuals was the working class, who worked long hours 6 days a week in the factories and coal mines under terrible working conditions. Additionally, their life expectancy was short compared to the wealthy upper class. By the end of Victoria's reign, England controlled much of the world's trade. The working class was making progress in the area of working conditions, and their lifestyles were improving. This was because many of the working class people were represented in the House of Commons. Reforms which benefited the English people were a public health bill, a bill to improvise housing, and a bill for land reform. There was a strict code of moral conduct during the Victorian era, largely designed by the middle class. It was very important to be respectable. People broke the moral code out of day, but it was secretive and not discussed. This was a common theme written about during the Victorian era. Charles Dickens was the most famous writer of the time. His books were about the common people, the way they lived, worked, what they thought, and the way they interacted with each other. Fun facts: Charles Dickens' house had a secret door in the form of a fake bookcase. The fake books included titles such as The Life of a Cat in 9 volumes. This was at his home in Gad's Hill in Kent. He also reputedly had a series of fake titles called The History of a Short Chancery Suit in 47 volumes, a reference to the very long Chancery case which inspired his novel Bleak House. The Oxford English Dictionary credits him with the first use of butterfingers, crossfire, dustbin, fairy story, slow coach, and whoosh. Dickens also gets the credit for boredom in the Oxford English Dictionary, coined in his novel Bleak House, 1852 to 53, but this has since been traced back to 1830. It is generally believed that the Victorian era was the best in English history. England was at the height of power with a large empire, a strong naval force, a prosperous economy, and excellent leadership. People believed that war was in the past and they were optimistic about the future. What next? Take the time to go back and review the lesson on your own. After your review, complete the lesson review for the lesson and submit for grading. Remember, your submission should follow all the rules for standard written English. All submissions must be written in your own words and sources used cited at the end. How to cite sources in APA format. When you reference a source within an APA-style paper, whether it is using a direct quote, repurposing an image, or simply referring to an idea or theory, you should insert an in-text citation, the author's surname, and the date of publication within parentheses straight after a direct quote. The URL citationmachine.net will assist you in creating citations.